Hello, Ventura. I'm Camille Harris, and I want to thank you for watching today. I'm really honored to be your hostess on a positive program about Ventura. This is Our Ventura, and it's about wonderful people doing wonderful things in our town. And we all need to know about it. These are tough times, and it's good to hear good news. I have today as my guests two very special citizens who've done so much for our city. One is Sherry Cash. She is the heroine of the homeless and an advocate for the homeless. And with her is Captain Bill Finley from the Salvation Army. And they are leading a project that will give us a comprehensive solution to an age-old problem that has a lot to do with homelessness. And they're here to tell you about it today. So welcome, Bill and Sherry. Thank you so much for coming to share this with us.
Thank you.
So this is called
the Gateway.
The Gateway. And now, how did you come up with that name?
Well, we were looking for something that would be a multi-service agency because as I helped homeless people, I was traveling all over town to different places. We thought, what if there was a hub where more of all the services that were already existing could be more cohesively represented to the services of the public, not just for people that are homeless with mental illness, but for the family members with people that have this problem when they're looking for services and where to go.
So it's for the whole family, not just the person who's homeless?
It's for anybody in need. One of the things that we know about homelessness in Ventura is it impacts not just the guy who you think of when you think about homeless. When we imagine somebody who's homeless, the image most of us have is somebody with a long beard pushing a shopping cart, flying a sign in downtown.
Right.
And what we're trying to say is that is one image of homelessness. That is one of the faces. Mm-hmm. There are many faces to homelessness. There's also the family that is out of work, or broken arm equals lost, can't pay rent, so they lose their housing, or they can't pay their car, so they can't get to work, so they lose their housing. Or there's the addiction, or the mental illness. There are lots of faces to homelessness that we need a center that's comprehensive enough to address all of those faces and a lot of those issues that lead people into homelessness that not just impact the individual, especially with addiction or mental illness, but also the family. Anytime you deal with addiction or mental illness, it impacts not just the individual who's going through that issue, but it also impacts their entire family and community structure around them. And so the goal of the Gateway is to be a multi-agency, multi-service center that will enable the community to reach out to people, to love them, to care about them, but also to a place where people can come to find healing and hope. And for many who live a pretty hopeless life.
Mm-hmm. And how did you get into this, Sherry? Because I know that you operate really boots on the ground with the homeless and on a one-on-one. And I'm just wondering what gave you that passion and that caring and that love for this particular group of people?
About 7 years ago, I was volunteering in a thrift store, Timeless Treasures. It's not there anymore. It was on Chestnut. And I went to help a man that was all disheveled and stinky, and he came in for shoes. And without any problem, I turned to help him with these shoes, and I looked at him and realized it could be my brother, who I hadn't seen in 30 years. Oh. And I was touched in my heart because I was having compassion for this man, but I didn't have compassion for my brother. So I called family members, and he came back in my life, and I found out he also had mental illness, which was one of the main reasons why, when our father died, I was 9 and he was 12. He took to the streets and then to drugs and alcohol. He said he passed away in 2006 and said he would have never changed anything in his life. He did some wonderful, wonderful things, and he was a good person, but those dual diagnosis problems ended up keeping him from being a good neighbor. And when he was a neighbor for a while, when I'd find him housing, he'd lose that housing again. So he'd oftentimes end up in the park playing dominoes with other people who I had met, and they were nice people, and I started hearing some of their stories. So I said, well, Tom, when I get you housing next we're going to work with Vicki and Greg, and then after that, we're going to work with Charles, and after that, James, and after that, and one by one, people use my cell phone and a post office box, and when someone can be contacted, this is no different than what all our agencies do. It's just this difficult to reach people because they don't know where to go, or they don't have the energy to even take a bus ride anywhere. So sometimes I help them that way. Now we have one stop every Tuesday from 10 to 1 that helps at Public Health. It helps everybody in one big room with a lot of little tables in it with all the services. So this is the same kind of idea that started evolving out of that, even though I had learned that all these agencies we have Project Understanding, Turning Point, Salvation Army, the Harbor Church, Jewish Family Services. I could just go on and on. There's Catholic individual churches, Catholic charities. You know, there's so many. And in the beginning, I threw my hands up and said, this is just what's going on here. Except after I educated my own self, I saw, well, this is what we need. We need little satellites here and there. And the gateway won't really take away from satellites because that's what you need. Every hospital has a department to help with this, with social services. So we just all work together, find out how we work, and hopefully we can, at the gateway, we can have something like a membership card where when people come in, they actually have a membership card. And your situation and the help you need can be recorded so that we know when you show up again, where you've been, what's happened, what's your next step. You know, you might have dropped the ball before and now let's pick it up again. And it's really, really hard for family members too to deal with other family members like this, and they need help too. So that's how I got involved.
Well, that's wonderful. You know, I think so many times we get involved because we've been personally touched by homelessness and addiction, and I would guess that a great many people are touched by addiction in their own families. And how big is this addiction problem, Bill? As far as its relation to homelessness, I'm just curious.
Well, the last homeless count, which was done in January, counted about 600-ish, 600 and change, homeless individuals. We know that count is low for a number of reasons. One is a lot of the homeless are not seen.
Yes.
They get up, they find their shower, they go to work, they come back, and they just happen to not have a place of their own. Sometimes they're doubled up with family members or whatever. The addiction issue around homelessness is pretty substantial. I mean, we know that addiction in and of itself is a major problem in our culture. We can go across the board, whether we're talking about jails, homelessness, or dysfunctional households. Addiction is a major issue with all of those. What we find with homelessness is a lot of people who are getting released out of jail with no exit plan. They get released from both prison and jail, and end up on the streets. Some would argue that the jails are the largest homeless shelter in the county, and I'm not sure that's wrong. Many people get released from both the jail and the hospital in Ventura, right to the streets at 2, 3 a.m. in the morning. We know that in dealing with the individuals who are homeless, addiction plays a role in two factors. One is it breaks up families. What we work with right now primarily is families. And the number of families that are broken up because of addiction is staggering. And that's just the ones we see. So they're the ones that end up on the streets. We're not seeing the ones that families are broken up and they're now struggling, trying to pay 2 households, and still one of the parents is struggling with an addiction. The other place that we see that is in the individuals. The addiction gets to the point where they can no longer manage, and the addiction is running their life. Combined with many individuals on the street, not only have an issue with, not only have an addiction issue, whether it's alcohol or drugs, but also the mental illness. And a lot of times it's the mental illness that's the root cause. And so they end up what we call self-medicating.
Right.
So they have this mental illness, whether it's schizophrenia or other, depression or other debilitating mental illnesses that a lot of people struggle with. I think it's one of the most unknown and kind of sad factors in our culture is both of these are unknown. So they end up struggling with this addiction, this mental illness, and to cope with that, instead of going and seeing a psychiatrist or a doctor that they may not know about access to or even have access to, they end up self-medicating with alcohol, with drugs, and it takes its toll, and it leads them to homelessness. It's a major issue. It's hard to say what is the cause of homelessness because there's many, but I know that addictions and mental illness are a major cause, which is why in the very beginning, as part of this turning point, was around the table to say, in this center, whatever Gateway is going to become, we have to realize that we're going to have a large number that have issues of mental health and mental illness.
And mental illness.
Yeah.
I'm curious, in the Gateway project, if Alcoholics Anonymous is involved in that. They seem to be pretty established in the area of alcohol addiction. Well, also drug addiction, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, AA is Alcoholics Anonymous, and you have to remember, as an organization, they're a very loose organization. Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous and Cocaine Anonymous are all 12-step organizations that are made up of their members. So the reality is, yes, they will be involved. You will have meetings that are held in the Gateway. One of the reasons why I'm big on this is both my grandfathers were alcoholics who got sober, thank God. It's a needed. It's a needed component. It is not the only component in treatment, but it is one of the major components.
Well, what in the Gateway project, what exactly is your vision as far as what's going to be included in? Will it be a big building, or as you said, will it be satellites that ferry people to this building, or how's it going to work?
I think it could be all of that, right?
Yes.
I mean, the Gateway, what we've envisioned is, if you look on this back here, I don't know if people can see it. If not, you can go to venturagateway.org and take a look. One of the things we did when the group first got together, and the group is a collection of service providers, of interested citizens, of people who just have a heart to see this issue, at least have a solution. Not necessarily be the solution, because we realize that not everybody will get off the streets as a result of this project.
Yeah.
But a good number that want to, or eventually want to, can. And as service providers from both public entities, the county, both homeless healthcare and other departments within the county, service providers, Salvation Army, Turning Point, Project Understanding, other interested citizens came together. We said, where are the gaps? And that's actually what this diagram laid out. We spent a lot of time on figuring out if we're going to do something about this problem that we've talked about. We talk about the 10-year strategy to end homelessness. We spend a lot of time in meetings talking about what are we doing to deal with homelessness. And a lot of times we talk about very little tangible projects that are needed and good things. However, if we want to make a major dent in this issue, we need to be envisioning something bigger than dealing with shopping carts. We need to be doing something that involves having a way that people can't have a way out of their issues.
And in a certain way, Bill, doesn't the Gateway already exist? It really already exists.
Some of it does. Some of it does. I think and what we targeted was, where are the gaps? And what we realized a couple things. First, if you have a single man or a single woman or a family, and they end up homeless, like that, which it can. We know that whether people get kicked out, whether they are discharged from the hospital, or whether they discharged from jail, people end up homeless every day, like this. They went from house to homelessness overnight. Those individuals right now have nowhere to go in the city of Ventura for 8 months out of the year. When the emergency shelter is not operating, when the winter warming shelter isn't operating, there's nowhere for them to go. So we recognize that was one piece that's missing. It's a major piece. It's also the most difficult piece. When we say emergency shelter, everybody goes, okay, that's great, as long as you don't put it next to me.
Yes. Yes,
so
that is a big concern.
We know that that's a need. And if that's a need, then there is going to be a physical structure. That's a given.
Yes.
That there is something, a big piece of the puzzle that's missing. You got all these pieces out here that some of them are more connected than others. But you got this big chunk in the middle that's missing. And the shelter is that piece. But it's also designed as a place where you have staff there, a good chunk of the time, at least Monday through Friday, probably on the weekends too, At least, like 8 to 7, 8 in the morning to 7 at night, where people can call or come by and get an answer to a problem.
So that would be the gateway. Would be the shelter.
It would be the shelter and what we're calling the one stop. It's the place where people can come. They're going. You know what? I need help. I need to know how I can pay how I can feed my family over the weekend. I need to know how I can stay in my house. I need to know. Where do I go to get electrical or utility assistance? And right now, the honest reality is some of that exists. Some of that funding exists, not all of it, but some of it does exist. And the problem is right now, you do this. As agencies. Oh,
they send you somewhere else.
Exactly.
And these people don't have the resources to...
And that's the reality, and that's the sad reality, is we even the best case management system, we send them over to this agency for this service, they send them to this agency for this service, we send them to the county for benefits and food stamps, and then they end up doing a map where they're tracing all across town. Sherry's been there. She's done it with some of her clients.
Are there vans, Sherry, to take people to all these different places?
No, there isn't. It's either my own car or after they've showered at Harbor Church and cleaned up, or I have bought my bus passes, little packages of 8 bus passes, or because some people even have to go all the way over to behavioral health, which is in Oxnard, and that loop to go over there for a 15-minute appointment is a 5-hour bus ride from downtown Ventura.
Well, plus you're dealing with a sick person most of the time, right? So they're really going to need some help. Even to give them a bus pass, will they use it?
It depends on the person. If they're capable, some of them are happy to have that independence. Plus, I learned by helping take care of my grandmother that you don't want to take away and do something for somebody that they can do themselves. Even if it's little, because that gives them independence and pride to be able to take care of themselves.
To be able to assess that. And I know from my own experience as an old Irish Catholic martyr that I thought I was helping people and I was doing the right thing earlier in my life, and really what I was doing was making myself feel better and enabling them and making them feel weaker. And, that's a big aha when you realize.
Originally, when the DVO 3 years ago, when we were working with the DVO, the task force and the DVO were working to clean up the downtown with compassion. Several people were using, it's the homeless issue. They're ruining our business. They're, scratching our cars and breaking our windows. But that was a single few incidences of vandalism, which was different than being homeless. So we stopped using that word, used the word of vandalism and criminality when it was necessary, and homeless was different. And they said we are not going to allow panhandling, and so many people that I was working with in the park panhandled, and I even advocated but my goodness, how are they going to, what if they go into seizures because they don't have alcohol? Because I know they can go into seizures. It's harder to detox from alcohol than it is heroin. Except when that happened and that ordinance went into effect, within 1 week, 80% of the people I was helping in the park came to go for their food stamps finally, to go link up into services, all because they knew they couldn't rely on that real easy thing every day. And some still do for cigarettes, but the majority it deepened relationship for health across the board, and I didn't think it would. So constantly I stand up for one thing, and I'm really, gung-ho Norma Ray for something, and then I get taught by our community, which is our community made up of our characters and individuals. I can't assume that it's like somewhere else I lived before, or I can't assume that it's like my dream world. It is who we are, and we're all working together, and we get to know each other, and we jump in community and dance. And we do this to create what will make our community better.
Well, speaking of dance, I know that you're a movement therapist as well, and I've heard that you are actually getting the homeless to participate in Tai Chi in the park. Is that so?
Right. Tai Chi and Feldenkrais. They've done both of them with me. When I was teaching a Feldenkrais class laying on the ground, one put their beer down over here, and they went to roll, and I said, watch out for your beer. Except, this one wonderful woman had said that she was a descendant of Mary, Queen of Scots, and she said she was a ballerina. And when she laid down on the ground to move, she knew movement. She knew what I was going to ask her to do next, because in those organic movement modalities, it's very natural to go to the next movement. And she knew what it was, and she just was rolling on that grass beautifully.
So that really helps them probably, I guess, with their self-esteem.
With awareness. One woman that lived at River Haven, she came to the classes that I was teaching over there at House of Dance. And she came, took 3 of them, and said, you know, you have to tell people to take 3, because in the beginning I couldn't figure out what I was doing. I was asking my brain to do too much, and she took 3, and I was fascinated by it, yeah.
Well, I don't want to digress too much, but I'm just curious. Excuse my ignorance. What exactly is Feldenkrais?
Oh, Feldenkrais is a way to learn how you move, to become aware of your choices you make, because once we learn to move in our life, once we learn to stand up on the coffee table and get our balance and reach for things, we mostly move the same the rest of our entire life. It's your own imprint. It's how you know your father, your mother walking through the airport from a distance. So the Feldenkrais classes are designed for you to lay on the floor or in a chair or against a wall and learn how you choose to move your body, and then find out other ways that might be options so that you can start doing it without pain.
Oh, I see. So this, and I would imagine that people that are homeless really do endure a lot of pain. I see them sleeping on the concrete.
Yes.
And yeah.
I brought a pizza once. I know I'm not supposed to, but I did. I brought a pizza, and they were hungry. This gang, this few people I know. So I brought a pizza to the picnic bench, and it smelled good. Opened the flap of the pizza box, and right away one of them said, "Oh, I can use that box tonight." And it wasn't about the pizza even. It was that he wanted that thick cardboard to put under him when he slept.
Oh, dear. Oh,
Broke my heart.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah. Well, that's the thing I have seen as I've gone to some of your meetings, that you have a very diverse group there, a lot of different people, and I must say different agendas, some of them.
Yes.
But they all have a wonderful heart. And they all share the same values. They're all there because they want to help. And they want to do something. They have different answers. This is the first really comprehensive answer that I've seen. And now the big question, Bill. This question is for you. Okay. How do we pay for this? I'm sure that's one you wake up with every day, right?
Well, paying for it to construct it is actually not as big a problem. There will be money that's raised to construct it. I mean, you know, the first step is finding a place for it. The second step will be building it. There are monies out there, both public and private money that is out there to do things like this in capital construction. The biggest cost is operating it. In terms of shelters or transitional living, there's not a lot of money out there to operate it. We can talk about the push to end homelessness, and yet the dollars haven't followed, the mandate.
Yes.
So we want to say we want to end homelessness in 10 years, and they've even said we want to end veteran homelessness in 5 years. But to do that, you've got to have money. It's expensive to get somebody off the streets. Not only is it expensive to do the triage, is really the better way to do shelters. I don't know if you've, one of my favorite shows of all time is MASH. I know I'm a bit young for it,
yes.
but I love MASH. And one of the interesting things in MASH is always the triage, or pre-op, where they bring everybody in and figure out what are the worst needs, who needs to go into surgery first, who can wait, and you see that. And it's a shelter's kind of like that. You see, okay, there are certain people and certain needs that are jumped to the front of the line. You need to spend additional time with. There are others that, you come back, you work with them for a little bit, you send them on their way, and you just keep following up with them on occasion. But they're doing great. They'll be fine. But they just needed that little treatment, and then they'll be on their way. There's others that are what I would consider major surgery. People who need a lot of help, need mental illness, and you know what? Maybe they'll never live independently again. And it's going to take resources. It's going to take permanent supportive housing. It's going to take Section 8 vouchers. It's going to take some of that for some of these individuals if we're going to end homelessness. So to get the shelter built is one thing. To operate it is another. And operating, we're going to need to raise more money. We live in a very generous community. Even in the recession, most of the service organizations are doing okay. We're not shutting our doors.
Yeah.
We're not going anywhere.
Because they're run well.
In
Not
fact,
all communities are like that, but ours are run well.
Yeah, in our case, we've actually increased our services. So we've been able to actually add a few more staff, and we've also been able to serve more people, which is an important thing. But it's going to be a need. I think right now, if we're talking raising money to build it probably in the next year or two, then operating it is another animal. The biggest thing right now is where to put it.
Well, that's interesting because a friend of mine is named Les Goldberg, and he's received the Jefferson Award for Hero of the Homeless. You know him, and he said years ago that he believes in homeless people becoming volunteers if they're not able to do it, to raise their self-esteem, give them something to do. So he goes out at the age of 94, gleaning several times a week, getting food and taking it around to homeless people. Les said to me that the best place for this would be as you're going north on Main Street, and just as you start to get to the bridge where the freeway is, there's a big field over there. And he said if it were there, then the homeless people could volunteer downtown. They could pick stuff up or whatever, but they would also be close to services. I think being close to services is important.
It's important. It is. And there are a lot of places this could go. There are, I don't want to paint a real rosy picture that you build a shelter and a place where homeless can come during the day and get services is always going to be nice and neat. It may not be. Sometimes it's messy. Dealing with people is messy.
Right.
But it's a need, and it's a big need. And so there are places where by no means it shouldn't go.
Right.
One is it needs to be close to transit. It's got to go where people can get to it.
Right.
It's got to go near jobs. It's got to go where people can find those jobs.
Exactly.
So there are a lot of places in the town it could go.
Well, we could talk about this for hours because there's so many pieces to it. But we're winding down now, and I want to make sure before we have to sign off that we know what we can do to help move this along. What can I do as an ordinary citizen? What can our viewers do? How can we help you?
Well, you can do two things. You can get involved. And the Social Service Task Force is kind of the umbrella organization of all the service agencies in town. The meeting is the first Wednesday of every month at Family to Family, which is where Catholic Charities is on the Avenue. That's one way. The second way is to donate to the organizations that are doing good work now. And for Salvation Army, since I'm here, I'll give a plug. SalvationArmy-Ventura.org is how you can find out all of our information and donate. And then, honestly, look in your mirror and say, it's okay if it's in my backyard.
Okay. And now, one other thing. Yeah, the NIMBY thing is a big thing. How do we learn more about the Gateway? Is there a website for the Gateway?
It's called GatewayVentura.org.
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 Okay.
So educate yourself, and then share what you learn, and share where to go to learn more, and then develop your own opinion. And please, speak good for this good effort that's going to improve the quality of life for all of us in our community.
Thank you, Sherry, and thank you so much, Bill. This has been so
Thank
educational.
you, Camille.
And I hope you'll come back as this moves along, and we'll learn more about it and find out where it's going to be.
Yep.
And I'd like to thank all of you for watching today and learning some positive things about our Ventura. And I look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks for joining us. So long.